some Italian cheese bread. So we're going to start with 1 tablespoon of yeast in your mixing bowl. And then add in 1.5 cups warm water. You want to get that yeast working right away. This is just the instant yeast, the quick rise yeast. So we're going to get that started. And then we're going to be adding in, I have 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of basil, 2 teaspoons of oregano, and 2 teaspoons of parsley flakes. So we're just going to put that in there. And we're going to add in, I have between 3.5 to 4 cups of flour. So always start with a little bit less flour. So I'll start with my 3.5 cups of flour. And we're going to get our mixer going. So I'm going to just start mixing this. You're going to knead it for about 4 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to get it going and then we'll take a look at what that looks like after a couple of minutes. The dough's been mixing for a couple of minutes. My bowl is very clean, but I do find, I felt my dough feels very stiff and heavy, so I'm going to actually add a little bit of water. I'm not adding that extra 1/2 cup of flour at this point, but I'm going to add just a little bit of water. I think I want to try to soften this up a little bit. So I'm only doing a couple tablespoons. I'm going to let this mix in. It's going to take a little bit for it to incorporate, so I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Alright, you can hear that the dough is quite wet. I probably dropped in a bit too much, but then I'm just going to add that little bit of flour yet. Maybe a 1/4 cup. I still have about a 1/4 left in my bowl, and give it a chance to mix around. So we're going to let this mix for a couple more minutes yet, and then we'll be ready to let it rise. Alright, so it's been about 5 minutes. So I'm going to turn off my mixer and get the dough off your hook. So this is a little bit of a stiffer dough than my normal bread dough. It smells really good with all those spices in there. So we're just going to cover this up with a tea towel, or I've got my shower cap here, and we're going to let this rise. So let's give it an hour and I'll show you what it looks like in an hour. Our dough has been rising for an hour. So we'll pull it out of our bowl. And this is going to make 2 rings. So we're going to divide our dough in half. And you want to roll this out into approximately 8 by 12 inch rectangle. You might need to work it a little bit with your hands first to kind of get your shape going. So we're going to be making 2 little rings. And you'll have to have some shredded cheese, so whatever cheddar cheese or a mixture, whatever you like. We're going to put some cheese on here. So there's probably about a cup of cheese or so that you sprinkle in here. And you're going to roll this up as if you were doing like the cinnamon buns. So we're going to be rolling it the long way. Don't want anybody to not have enough cheese in their bun. Alright, you're going to roll that up, and then you're going to create a ring on your baking sheet. So you'll have a parchment lined is probably the best, because we're going to have to put some other stuff on here later, and it makes a little bit of a mess, so it might be a little bit better than just spraying your cookie sheet. And you're going to make sure you pinch your ends together so that it creates a ring. So you're going to do this with both of them, and then you're going to cover it and let it rise for another hour. You can, at this time, do the slashes in the top of your dough, or we can do it later. I think we're going to leave that till a little bit later to put the slashes in the top. So just get your 2 rings put together, and then we'll see you in an hour again. An hour? So I decided to slash one of my rings before the rise, and I'll do one after. I don't know if there's going to be any difference. This is a great way to test it out. So I'm going to slash the tops of this one as well. So that way it can spread open a little bit when you're baking. And then you want to have 1 egg yolk and a tablespoon of milk and mix that up together. And we're going to brush the rings. Just make sure you get it around all the sides. And this is why you want to be on parchment paper, because it makes a little bit of a mess. And it's just easier to clean up later on in your pan. So we're just going to brush all around the sides. Inside and outside. So we're having spaghetti tonight, so this is a great bread to have with pasta because it's got all these Italian spices in it. All right. That looks good. And then you want to get yourself some Parmesan cheese. And we're going to sprinkle that all over the top. So now this will stick to it because of the egg and milk on top. I'm going to try to just brush a little bit more around the edges because I got my egg all the way around. I want to have that nice cheesy crust all the way around. All right. So we're going to bake this in the oven, 350 degrees for about half an hour. I'll let you know how long I actually put it in my oven. Between 30 and 35 minutes I think is what we're going to need. So let's bake this up. And if you get your timing just right, it takes about 3 hours for this whole process. So if you're going to have dinner at 5:30, start your whole process around 2:30 so you'll have nice warm bread coming out of the oven just at dinner time. So I'll show you what this looks like when it's out of the oven. Our Italian cheese bread is out of the oven. So I wanted to just show you the difference here. This one here is the one that I cut the slits before it was rising, and this one here was after the rise. This one here, it tended to poof up more, and actually the center kind of closed in. I would probably suggest if you do it ahead of time, it's a bit nicer because then you can really cut your rings a bit nicer. So this one here, nice crunchy crust on there with that cheese. I'm actually cutting this when it's really hot, so I just pulled it out of the oven. So here you're going to have your cheese bread. Gotta get right to the bottom. Oh, it smells so good. All right, there's your Italian cheese bread. Eat this with dinner, with your spaghetti or any other pasta. Doesn't get any better than that.